Yes.
And then you get into the city and it becomes obvious what the real industry of Roswell is,
Yeah,
which is the cover.
yeah, well,
And the aliens.
every street light in Roswell has alien eyes on it.
Oh, yeah, I know. The Central Cafe right downtown is called the Cover Up Cafe, and the menu is, I mean, it's hysterical.
It is.
That whole town's making money off of.
And making fun of it.
Oh, I'm making fun of it at the same time, yeah.
Actually, there's a really good Polish-German restaurant there, so.
Oh, the sauerkraut's to die.
I believe it's
Put
10
the
o'clock.
sauerkraut with all the meat
Anybody
in it.
dispute that?
Nope.
All right.
Nope.
So
Let's get
when
started.
you
The
mention-
name of this
go to
panel
Ross-
is
Points east.
Points East. I don't know who comes up with these clever titles.
I do.
In fact, it was me.
Was it you? I was gonna blame it on Dragon Con, but since you took it.
They told me I had to name the panels, so I named the panel.
What we're gonna discuss in this panel, and it's a little bit tricky because we've got tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock a panel called Snarking the Plots, which is where we will get into what's gonna be happening in the
Where we
future.
lock the door.
That's where we lock the doors and everybody's sworn to silence and,
And you leave with a little collar.
you know, and the
around your
collars
neck.
are put around your neck or, you know, blow up if you spill it. Anyway, so we'll have to be a little bit careful today not to overlap too much in that. But what this is about is so far the 1632 series has done very little in, well, I was gonna say the Far East, but actually,
The Near East.
Southeast.
well, by the way, just so everybody knows, if you ever wondered, the term Near East and Middle East today are used as basically synonyms. It used to be coherent and logical. Near East referred to what we think of as the Arab world, Levant. Middle East referred to India and Pakistan, which makes sense, it's in the middle. Far East, I don't know when the shift happened, but it became the Middle East, began, you know, I don't know when that happened. But so far in the series, we haven't basically had hardly anything to say about India, Pakistan, China, Japan, you know, anything out there, which is to say, even in those days, the majority of the world's population. We've been able to get away with it so far because it's plausible. Ring of Fire happens in May of 1631. Saxon Uprising, the latest book in the series, ends in May of 1636. Well, actually March of 1636. So a little bit less than 5 years has passed. So it's plausible that it would take that much time for things to really start spreading. As it turns out, actually things have been happening that you didn't know about, but they have. Just as things have been happening in Russia that you didn't know about, but will when Gremlin Games comes out here. What has been written so far is Ivor Cooper here has a book that is coming out. We don't know when, but
Soon.
But when I say it's coming out, contracts have been signed, money has been paid. You know, this is not speculation. And he's finished the manuscript. I just read the last story last night. Works fine, by the way. So we will be turning that manuscript into Bane very soon. Now, I don't know when they'll schedule it, but that story, mostly, it all takes place in the New World, but half of it involves what the Japanese are doing, which I will let Ivor describe later. But, so we are finally going to be bringing Japan into the series in a really pretty big way. And then we will discuss this no further, but Ivor and I had a conversation yesterday, and Ivor came up with a really nifty idea, so I think that we've got to talk some more about it, but I'm thinking we might do a novel together that would bring China into the series. We'll not talk about that today, though. We'll talk about it tomorrow. What that leaves, and then the Ottoman Empire, are we putting Ottoman Empire in points east?
Yes.
Yes, okay. The Ottoman Empire is about to figure in this series in a really, really major way. It already appeared in Saxon Uprising. How many people here have read Saxon Uprising? Right,
Cool.
Just about everybody, okay.
Part of the
Well, you know, there was at least one chapter where you actually see the Ottomans on stage, and there was a number of references to them. The Ottomans, as was probably obvious from the Saxon uprising, it looks like they're getting ready to attack Austria, and sure enough, they will. And once they attack Austria, that will change the entire equation of everything that's happening in Syria in all kinds of different ways. Political alliances. Dramatically, the reason I wanted to do it was because about 2-3 years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and realized that the 1632 series, we were in danger of peace breaking out all over.
Okay, that.
Because there was really no longer any plausible, really major
Resist.
opponent left in Europe, with the French being knocked out and the Austrian, so we needed, you can't have that for this kind of series. You need, it's not military SF, and it's not really war stories, but it's stories that require that kind of
Background.
for stories. I mean, lots of different kinds of stories get told in it. David and I are doing a novel. It's a murder mystery in Magdeburg. It takes place basically around the same time as Saxon uprising. It's not a war story, but these are all stories told in times of war. It's like telling a whole series of stories set in the Napoleonic era or set in the World War II, whatever. You need that framework. So bringing the Ottomans in does that. What it does mainly is it will wind up tying up most of the military power of the USC, which means they can't just use that military power anywhere they want to, which means there's lots and lots of room for adventures everywhere else. That's why we can have, as we will, a novel where Lieutenant Eddie Cantrell, missing his foot and with his new Danish wife, heads off to the West Indies and winds up discovering that Admiral Simpson's not going to come back him up, because Admiral Simpson has to go to the Mediterranean and deal with the Ottomans. And so that means you can have at least one novel with Eddie Cantrell and Anna Catherine having all kinds of wonderful adventures. Honestly, I've said this before, writing novels is a lot more like making sausage than people really want to look at. And a lot of decisions authors make are based on these kinds of really slimy calculations of what do you got to do to keep your people
Well,
busy.
We don't have enough
Lois
fat.
Bujold says that the way she plots her novels is she says, what's the worst thing that I can do to this character? And then she writes it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happens. Anyway, so the Ottomans are coming in a big way. And then the one thing that's really up in the air, we haven't really thought much about it, what to do with, this is the period of the heyday of the Mughal Empire in China. And we touched on
India.
Sorry, India.
There's some politics right there. Be present.
It's interesting. Shah Jahan is in power right now. He's the guy who built the Taj Mahal. In fact, I think the Taj Mahal is already under construction. He started
Almost done.
1632. Is it
Almost done.
Is it almost done? And we are not too far away from having that monster Aurangzeb, the Muslim fanatic, replacing him.
It was 1658.
Was it that late? I thought it was sooner than that. Well, whatever happens,
We can.
we would
Right
do
now
something.
he's
15.
Right now he's a viceroy working at subduing one of the sultanates
Okay,
that are just below the empire.
So we can kill him, right?
Oh, yeah.
We can kill it.
World history would be a
You
much.
see, it sounds sociopathic, but that's the way you think.
Yeah, no, the world would have been a better place without him, there's no doubt about it. Anyway, we haven't done much with the Mughals, we haven't really thought much, and we haven't done hardly anything with this. Persia in this day was under the Safavid, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but the Safavid dynasty, and we've done a squat with them, except
They're mentioned.
well, they
Well,
figure in
you've
terms
counted
of
back
fighting
then.
the Ottomans, but in terms of what exactly it might do to them. Anyway, so the point is, the series is just finally getting to the point where we're going to start bringing in the Near East, the Middle East, and the Far East, actually, all in a big way. And I'm gonna stop talking because I need to drink a little more coffee. I do. Ira, why don't you describe briefly what you're doing?
Okay, well, what you have that's happened in Japan is they have just gotten over the Sengoku period, the war, a period essentially of civil war. There were 3 leaders who successfully united Japan for a time: Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, and Ieyasu. And Ieyasu established the system that stuck, the Tokugawa rule. His grandson is the shogun right now, and there is a completion of the consolidation of power going on there. The Christians made contact with Japan early in the 16th century, and they had useful things like firearms that worked on a practical basis. The Japanese were certainly aware of the Chinese usages of gunpowder earlier, and the Japanese very, very quickly started copying the Portuguese arquebuses and using them, and in general were very heavily involved with the Europeans in trade. For one thing, the Japanese, well, I won't get into that. But in any event, the Christianity reached a point where at one point there were 300,000 Japanese that were Christian. The trouble is, the Spanish and Portuguese were also dabbling in politics, and this brought down the wrath of the shogunate upon them when it consolidated power. There's persecution of Christianity, missionaries expelled, and then a more general crackdown. Things culminated in our timeline in the Shimabara Rebellion of 1637-38, which started as a pretty generic peasant rebellion based on famine and general crackdown, and became a more religious thing. Over 100,000 troops were assembled to crush that rebellion, and shortly thereafter the Portuguese were banned entirely, and a little bit later the Dutch were relocated to have their trading base on this little artificial island, Najima, in the mouth of in Nagasaki Harbor, and that pretty much was where things stayed in relative seclusion of Japan from the West until Perry changed things in the mid-19th century. So this is really was the cusp for the Japanese, and what I have happened is in 1633, knowledge of Granville and information about what